day 26 of our 2021 daily Bible reading. Going all the way through the Bible again. We use the one-year Bible. It's an Old Testament, a New Testament, a Psalms, and a Proverbs. And when you start January 1 and go all the way through December the 31st, you've read all the way through the Bible. I see my mama's on today. Good morning, Mom. Montana, Karen, Kathy. Good to see you guys. Karen, Joy Sue's on. It's a terrific Tuesday, you guys. Hi, Debbie Nolan. January the 26th, day 26. I told you guys yesterday that through these weeks of getting over this COVID virus, I've had a lot of Sabbath rest. It's been very peaceful. It's been very quiet. I knew God was doing a work during this period of time. I was trying to really focus and listen. And yesterday I mentioned that I feel like kind of a theme has been brewing, maybe, especially during my daily Bible reading. But I got up extra early this morning and had some time to reflect. And I read the scriptures first last night and then read them again this morning. And I like when I have that extra time and I can kind of marinate and commune with God, and that abiding that we have one with another. He's in me and I'm in him. And as I reflected this morning, actually he's kind of shown me that this started in the fall of 2019. In the fall of 2019, all throughout my Bible, there's little notes in my columns where I started writing out, and God warned him in advance. God warned him in advance. And then, of course, COVID hit in the year 2020, and at the very first part of the year, I was kind of asking God, how come I didn't know about this? I mean, why didn't I know this was going to happen? And why didn't you prepare me? And as I went back and reread and reflected, then I got to seeing that, and it was like, oh, wait a minute, God has been preparing me in advance. God did warn me. God prepared us for such a time as this. So it, looking back on it, I see where it started with, he got my attention about the warnings. And now he's building on that to right now where I'm at is almost daily in my readings. I'm seeing where when we see, capital S, capital E, that's my spiritual way of using God's eyes to see. When I see the way he sees, I can save myself a lot of heartache. I can save myself a lot of toil, a lot of hard work, a lot of unrest. When I see the way he sees, that's when you can have Sabbath rest. Even when your body's fighting off a virus, you can have Sabbath rest. Even when the checkbook doesn't look like you would like for it to look. You can have Sabbath rest even when a call comes in the middle of the night. One of those dreaded calls. You can have Sabbath rest even when the storms rage around you. And so here we are today, January the 26th of 2021, reading Exodus chapter 2, starting in verse 11, going through chapter 3, verse 22. And we're reading Matthew chapter 17, verses 10 through 27. And the Psalms 22, 1 through 18, and Proverbs 5, 7 through 14. And we're reading about the life of Moses. So if we just step back from the reading for a moment, almost anybody in the world, you can ask who Moses is, and they're going to know. Would you all agree with me that he's just a pretty doggone famous person? I suppose there's circles and places in the world that maybe they won't know who Moses is, but not in my world. I grew up hearing Bible stories and having Bible stories about Moses read to us and Sunday school classes about Moses, and he's a pretty famous guy. So what is he known for? Well, what's he famous for? Well, he's famous for listening to God and leading God's people out of slavery in Egypt into the promised land, right? He's famous for being that man who the people could go to because he was God's man. He was that man the people could go to because he was God's man, and God spoke to him for the people. That's who Moses was. Moses is the one who God gave the 10 Commandments on stone tablets. Those are the things, right? I'm probably leaving out several things, but he's well known, right? Well, here we are, though. Over the last couple of days, we read about how the world evolved to this place where Pharaoh made the decree that all males born had to be killed, had to be thrown into the Nile River, because the Israelites was becoming so populated. There were so many of them that they were overpowering the Egyptians. And so Pharaoh's attempt to get rid of them was to have the males thrown into the river. Much like Hitler's plan was to get rid of the lesser class of people and have them exterminated. And there's nothing new under the sun, right? And Moses was born into one of the Hebrew families that was to be eliminated, and his mother hid him for 3 months and then placed him in a basket on the Nile, and Pharaoh's daughter ends up finding him and then brings his own mother in to nurse him. So she nurses him for all the years, because back then they nursed them way longer than we nurse babies today. And Moses knew that he was a Hebrew. And Moses had this sense about him that he was created for something more. Now, when you read all the way through this book, you find scriptures that will tell you that God thought of us before he laid the foundation of the earth, that he knew our name in our mother's womb, that there was a plan and a purpose put into place for us before we were ever born. Moses sensed that. And right in the beginning, Exodus chapter 2, verse 11, many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. Moses got ahead of God, and Moses committed murder. Moses saw an injustice being done, and he took matters into his own hands. Moses got ahead of God. I mean, how many of us have a sense of, oh, I'm supposed to do something. I'm supposed to, and then we go ahead and we get out and we get ahead of God. And when we get ahead of God, it doesn't ever work out right. So the next thing you know, Moses is caught up into the effects, the consequences of what he's done, and all he can see around him at this point in time, all he can see in his life is they're going to kill him. They're going to kill him. All he can see in his life is failure. All he can see in his life is problems. All he can see in his life is death and destruction. All he can see in his life is he's got to get out of there. And so he flees and he goes into a different land. And for 40 years, he's there not doing what God had called him to do. And he convinces himself that he's not the one. So as I read this today, and again, once again, in this theme of this journey God has me on, that I want to just share with you, started in the fall of 2019, God started pointing out to me, or maybe I started listening for the first time, because I believe he's always been saying it to me, about how he does warn us in advance, how he does prepare us for things to come, how he sees things ahead of us. Then a year of COVID raging the globe, killing hundreds of thousands of people, marking millions of people with fear and dread that a diagnosis is a death sentence. And jobs start going away, businesses start closing, travel gets shut down. The world as we knew it ceased to exist in the same form. And then, much to my surprise, I get a diagnosis. I have weeks of symptoms. Praise God, they were mild. I stayed in Sabbath rest, never had any fear, stayed alert, watched, wasn't foolish, tried daily to listen to my Father. And it's like he starts showing me another dimension, that not only does he warn us in advance, prepare us in advance, but he starts once again bringing me back to what he's worked in me so many times about seeing things the way he sees things. And in order to do that, we have to do that with faith. Faith is the evidence of things hoped for, the substance of things not seen. To see the way he sees is looking through the eyes of faith, looking through the eyes of hope, looking through the eyes of love. And today's reading, this is the thought that came to me. When God thought of Moses before he ever laid the foundation of the earth, did he think of Moses as a murderer? Or did he think of Moses as the redeemer of the people, of his people, out of slavery? Did he think of him as the leader of the Israelites for over 40 years? How did God see Moses? And then in today's reading, how did Moses see Moses? See, at the time he at the time he killed the Egyptian, he knew he was doing something wrong, because he first looked around to make sure nobody's going to see him, and then he hid the body. So he saw himself as doing something wrong, but he didn't see himself as a murderer until the accusation came, when he was chiding the two Hebrews who was squabbling with each other, and they said, "What are you going to do to us? Kill us like you killed the other guy?" Then he started seeing himself as a murderer, and he knew he had to get out of there, and he had to flee, and he ran from the very purpose that God had put inside of him to be the one that would save his people. I hope what I'm saying is making sense, because this is the work God's doing inside of me, and he's using these daily readings to show me that if by faith I could start looking at the end instead of looking at the path along the way, my joy would be greater, my faith would be greater, the enjoyment of life would be greater. I wouldn't get so caught up in the weeds. You know, it's like have you ever just gotten out into a pasture, raw land, and you want to get from here to there, and you're looking and there's no trail, and maybe occasionally you can find a little trail that maybe the rabbits travel. I'm a country girl, so literally you can be out in a pasture and you can find a little trail that you think maybe the rabbits created, that they follow the same path every day, or maybe a deer trail, or cattle. The cattle can create trails that you can follow. And so I see this as a journey, that we're on this journey, and Mother Earth is out here and all of its glory, and we're placed here. You know, God decides before he ever laid this Mother Earth with the foundations of it, I'm going to have Elizabeth born on this day. I'm going to pluck her out of my timeline and place her into the Earth's timeline. And I've got a plan and I've got a purpose for her. And so it's just like I start with a clean slate, and there's this field, this raw field all the way around me, and I've got to start making my path. And so all of a sudden I find a path, and there's an opening. And so I start following this path, but all along this path are these weeds. And the weeds get in the way, and the weeds will scratch my leg, and my leg will bleed, and the weeds have thorns in them, and they'll poke me. And so on this path of life, this journey of life, we are born, and we have this sense of we're invincible. Nothing can harm us. We don't have fear. We don't have fear of death when we're young. We can conquer the world, and this dream that's in us is moving us forward, that we're going to accomplish great things, that I can do anything I set my mind to. And then all of a sudden, a bad word is said against us, or we make a bad decision and a consequence happens, and guilt, shame, condemnation comes on us, and we start doubting that we're going to accomplish what we were supposed to do. And next thing you know, we get married, we have kids, we have bills to pay, and life just gets hard. And heaven forbid a COVID virus thinks it's got some right in this land. And the next thing you know, we're looking at all the cuts and bruises and scrapes and all the little pricks where the thorns have along this life's journey is, stuck into our skin, and all we see is the weeds. All we see is the junk around us. And we don't even, we even can reach a place where we don't even feel like we have purpose anymore. We don't even know what God's purpose for our life is. And this is where Moses found himself. Moses felt invincible. He felt so confident of who he was and what he was supposed to be doing that he actually stepped out and killed an Egyptian on behalf of the Hebrews. And then bam, life happens, and he's fighting for his life, and he's afraid that he's going to be killed, and he flees, and he just runs. And so many of us, we just run. We may not go anywhere physically, but we just curl up in a little ball, and we just watch life pass us by, and then we don't know why we're so depressed, and we don't know how come we're unfulfilled, and we feel like life has no meaning. And what God is showing me is, almost everything I just said is exactly why we do Dream Big retreats, is to help us see what God has for us. But it's like he's taking me to a brand new place. That the question for me this morning was, how did God see Moses? What did God see when he thought of Moses? See, in that moment, in the twinkling of an eye, when God thought of Moses, he thought of him from the end. That Moses is my man. Moses is the one that will lead my people out of bondage. That's how God saw Moses. God didn't see Moses as, he's the one that's going to kill the Egyptian when he's not supposed to. Moses is that failure that's going to run and hide and live in a foreign land and then argue with me. Well then the question has to be asked then, when God thought of you before he laid the foundation of the earth, he thought of you with the end in mind. He sees you fully accomplishing everything that he put into you to accomplish. So let's break it down to something small. Let's say that you hear from God that you are supposed to take a certain training. I'm just trying to think of something simple. God speaks, you hear, oh, I'm supposed to enroll in this course, I'm to take this training. And then immediately what do we start doing? We start, oh, well, was that you, God? Am I really supposed to spend the money on that? God, that's something brand new, God. Am I hearing you? Am I listening to the right voice? Well, let's say this really was God. We start seeing the weeds. We start seeing that, well, am I going to have enough time for this? Am I going to have enough money for this? All these questions come up inside of us that causes doubt, insecurities, frustration. When God saw you completed already, way back before he laid the foundation of the earth, he knew you would enroll in that class and he knew you would be successful, and he sees you on the end of that. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's a new way of activating the faith. We call those things that are not as though they are. We live by faith, not by sight. We can get rid of doubt and insecurities and just walk in the grace given to us this day, knowing that today we are accomplishing what God has set out for us to do this day. And so in my life, there's a couple of doors being opened that I never dreamed ever would happen. And I know that what God is telling me is to look at that as though it's completed. Look at that. And one of them is, I've been introduced to a new publisher, and he wants to publish some of my books, and he wants to develop a national platform for me. And I know that God is using these stories to build my faith to take the next step on the journey. See, I'm not supposed to live at the end as though it's already happened, but yet I'm supposed to see myself accomplishing what God wants me to accomplish. And all in Sabbath rest, not getting caught up in, oh, what if, or, oh, what if I mess up, or, what if I end up running like Moses? And I just hope this is speaking to somebody else, because God has put a purpose into every one of our hearts. There is something you're supposed to accomplish. It may very well be that you get up today and you go to your job today. But that is accomplishing the purpose for today. It may be that you're supposed to get up and dig that ditch today, clean out your garage, clean out your car, sweep out your car. Today you're supposed to do the dishes. It doesn't have to be some great big thing, but see yourself the way God sees you. God sees you as sinless, because he's already paid the price for every sin you'll ever commit. He sees you white as snow. God sees you as love. He doesn't see you as an unforgiving, resentful human being. God sees you in the finished work of the cross. I just wanted to share with you. 2 times in my columns I write today, this particular one about Moses, I wrote 2021. When Moses was born, God did not see him as a murderer. He saw him as the deliverer of his people. Call those things that are not as though they are. See the end. Don't get caught up in the weeds. Begin with the end in mind. And then moving forward into Matthew 17, when Jesus is telling them, he's telling them what's going to happen to him. Verse 22, after they gathered again in Galilee, Jesus told them, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of the enemies. He will be killed, but on the third day he will be raised from the dead. And then this is what we do. This next sentence is what we all do. And the disciples were filled with grief. But wait a minute. He just got through telling them he will be raised from the dead. Why did they not focus on the end? The end is he's not dead. The tomb is empty. He's still alive. It's what sets us apart as believers from every other religion that's out there. We are the only belief system that worships a living God, not a dead God, not somebody who's died and passed away and has never come back again. We serve a living God. But they focused on the fact that he was going to be killed, and they were full of grief. See, that's what we do. If they had focused on the truth of what he's already told them, I will be back. I will be raised from the dead, then they would have had nothing to grieve. They wouldn't have even had to have been sad at his crucifixion. But we get caught up in the weeds, and it doesn't look like what we think it's supposed to look like, and it doesn't feel like what we thought this was going to feel like. And then we get to worrying, and we get to feeding this flesh, and we get to, instead of focusing on seeing what God sees. So I'm just sharing with you. I wrote my column here, 2021, Jesus told them the ending from the beginning. Once again, the ending from the beginning. If we see what God sees. God didn't see a murderer when he thinks about Moses. God sees his man. You're his. You're his child. You know, the Bible tells us how much more God loves us than we even love our own children. That if we'll give our own children good gifts, how much more will he give to us? And you know, I had the thought this morning that we would never give our kids COVID. We would never take away any earning capacity for our children and cause them to live homeless in the streets. We would never wish cancer on our own children. And yet that's exactly what we accuse God of all the time. Instead of remembering that Jesus Christ took all of our infirmities on himself, that by his stripes we are healed. We don't focus on the healed, we focus on the COVID. We don't focus on the healed, we focus on the diagnosis. We don't focus on what's already taken place for us. We focus on what if I get that diagnosis. And that can be applied in any area of our life. In any area of our life. Anyway, I just wanted to share this morning. So it's a terrific Tuesday. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Love you guys.